Montana Territory. Autumn of 1874, the wind blew sharp across the Gallatin Valley, tugging golden leaves from the cottonwoods and pushing them downriver like forgotten promises. It was just past dusk when Almina Ward rode a stolen bay mare straight through the edge of Isaac McCready's cattle range, her coat too thin for the cold and a loaf of bread tucked under her arm like a newborn. She kicked the horse harder, ignoring the sting in her ribs, and dared not look back. Isaac saw her from the barn loft where he had been stacking hay. He squinted against the fading light, watching the figure cut across his land with a kind of desperate determination he had seen before during the war, and once more in the hollow eyes of folks who had nothing left. He climbed down slow, brushing hay from his shirt, eyes narrowing on the fading track of hoofprints. "That's my mare," he muttered, then grabbed his rifle, mounted his chestnut gelding, and followed. By the time he caught up, the woman had stopped. Not by choice she had tried to cross the creek, and the mare had gone lame. The bread was still clutched tight in her arm, though soaked through and useless now. She turned at the sound of hooves behind her, eyes wide and wild, a split lip, dirt on her cheek, but she stood her ground. Isaac pulled his horse to a halt, rifle slung across his back but untouched. "That's my horse," he said, voice even. She didn't answer. He eyed the soaked loaf. "And I reckon that's the bread I made this morning." Still, she said nothing. Her hands trembled. She looked like she had not eaten in days. He dismounted and stepped closer, slow. "You plan on shooting me, miss?" "No gun," she muttered. "What's your name?" She hesitated, jaw clenched. Then Almina Ward. Isaac nodded once. "Well, Almina Ward, if you're going to steal from a man, might as well take the whole damn thing." Her chin lifted, defiant, shoulders squared. He pointed at the loaf and cracked a half smile. "You forgot to steal my heart, too." She blinked, stunned. Then her knees buckled. Isaac caught her before she hit the ground. She came to on a cot in his barn, wrapped in a wool blanket that smelled faintly of cedar and horse. A kerosene lamp burned low nearby. Almina tried to sit up, but the soreness in her side pinned her down. She heard boots on wooden planks and turned her head. Isaac stepped into view carrying a tin cup. He handed it to her without a word. She drank. It was warm broth, salty, rich. Her stomach cramped from it, but she kept going. "I do not need your charity," she said, voice hoarse. "Good," he said. "I am not offering charity, just decency." She looked away. He waited a beat, then said, "You have someone looking for you." She shook her head. "No one left." He sat across from her, elbows on his knees. "Then why the stealing?" She stared at the ground. "My brother died last month, fever. We were living in an abandoned claim shack up the ridge. Nothing left after he passed. No food, no coin. I buried him in frozen dirt and walked 3 days before I found your barn." Isaac's jaw flexed. He looked at her slender frame, the bruises along her wrists. The way she winced every time she breathed. She was not a thief. She was starving. "I can find you work," he said, "if you want it." She raised her eyes to him slowly. Distrust still lingered, but something else was there too, worn down hope. "What kind of work?" "I have cattle, winter feed to lay in. The house needs tending. I will pay fair." Her throat bobbed. "I do not want you feeling sorry for me." "I don't," he said. "I just believe in giving folks a hand when they are down. That is all." He stood, gave her a nod, and left her to rest. By the 3rd day, Almina was moving better. She worked quiet, steady, and never asked for more than what she was given. She helped mend fences, fed the chickens, even cooked once, though she burned the biscuits and cursed under her breath, making Isaac laugh for the first time in weeks. He started leaving little things for her: thicker gloves, a scarf, a bar of hard soap. She never said thank you, but he saw how she tucked each item away like treasure. One night, while fixing the latch on the chicken pen, he asked, "You ever been out west before?" She shook her head. Born in Missouri, left after the war, nothing left for me there. You married, she snorted. I have not been that foolish, he grinned. Good, I would hate to be nursing a crush on a married woman. She froze, then turned to look at him. You are not serious. I am, he said calmly. You are strong, you do not give up, I admire that. Her lips parted, but no words came. She looked down at her hands, then back at him. I do not know how to be anything anymore, she said. Then we can figure it out together, he said, soft. For the first time she smiled. A week later she was still there, still working, still quiet. But she started humming sometimes when she swept the porch. And she made biscuits again, and this time they were perfect. Isaac came in from the barn one evening, dust on his coat, and found her sitting at the table, fixing a tear in one of his shirts. She looked up at him and said, I was thinking I might stay a little longer, if that is still all right. He crossed the room, knelt beside her chair, and took her hand. You can stay as long as you want, he said. This place is only missing one thing now. She tilted her head. He touched her cheek. You stole my horse, you stole my bread, but you forgot to steal my heart. Her breath hitched. It is yours if you want it, he added. Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded. He leaned in and kissed her, gentle, certain. And for the first time in a long, long while she felt safe. The first frost came in the night, and by morning the hills wore a silver hush. Isaac rose before the sun, as he always did, and found Almina already outside, sleeves rolled and breath fogging in the cold air. She was splitting kindling with the short-handled axe, her posture measured, precise. You'll dull the blade if you keep striking the dirt, he said, setting down the milk pail. She glanced over without stopping. Then sharpen it. He chuckled, walked past her, and let the barn swallow him whole. Inside, the cows shifted lazily in the dim light. He moved among them with practiced ease, but his thoughts kept circling back to her, not just her presence, but the way it had begun to weave into everything unnoticed, like thread pulled through buckskin. Later, he found her in the cellar, arranging the squash and potatoes by size. She didn't look up. You've got a mind for order, he said. I grew up with a father who drank too much, she replied. Order was the only thing that kept the roof on. He leaned against the frame. You ever think about planting something in spring? She dusted her hands. Not in years. I didn't think I'd live to see another spring. He stepped forward until they were only a breath apart. You will. She looked at him then, not startled, just quiet. I don't know how to be someone who plans ahead, she said. You don't have to be, he answered. We build it one day at a time. That night, he brought out a battered fiddle from the trunk beneath his bed. She was shelling beans by the hearth when he laid it across his lap and tuned the strings with calloused fingers. I didn't take you for a musician, she said. My mother taught me before I could lift a branding iron. He played something soft, mournful, and the sound filled the cabin like smoke. Almina listened without speaking, her hands stilling in her lap. When he finished, he didn't look at her. You want to try? I never learned. You've got steady hands. She hesitated, then crossed the room and sat beside him. He passed her the fiddle, careful, as though handing over something sacred. Her bowing was awkward, the strings squeaked, but she didn't laugh, and neither did he. You're not bad, he said. You're a liar. I'm hopeful. The next morning she took the fiddle down without asking. He watched from the porch as she leaned against the doorframe, coaxing 2 shaky notes from it before setting it back carefully in its place. Snow came early that year. Not heavy, but enough to trap warmth inside the walls and slow the chores. Isaac came in one evening with a twisted ankle from the north fence. He waved off her fussing at first, but she insisted he sit. She brought hot water and a cloth, knelt, and wrapped his foot with careful fingers. You don't have to do all this, he muttered. I know. She didn't look up. Her hands lingered just a second longer than they needed to. "I used to think if I stayed still too long, I'd vanish," she said. "But I'm starting to believe you can stop running and still be a person." He reached for her wrist, gentle. "You are more than just what you've survived." She swallowed hard. "And what are you?" "Someone who wants to be the rest of your life." She didn't answer right away. Her eyes shimmered, but her voice was steady. "Then teach me how to stay." They didn't speak again that night, but she didn't sleep in the loft. In the morning, he found her in the kitchen, frying cornmeal cakes and humming under her breath, the tune wandering in and out of something he'd once played for her. He didn't say a word, just set the table and poured the coffee. Outside, the wind had stilled. Inside, something new had begun to settle. The snow deepened across November, softening the ridgeline and hemming the valley in white. Morning sounds changed, hooves muffled in powder, the creak of frozen hinges, the sharp split of firewood echoing off drifts. Almina adjusted quickly, even as the cold settled into her bones and stayed there like a second skin. One morning, she stood at the window, watching the sky pale over the eastern hills. Isaac lay behind her, one arm slung over the quilt, his breath steady in sleep. She hadn't meant to wake so early, but some part of her had never unlearned the habit of getting up before she could be missed. He stirred when she moved toward the stove. "You always walk so light," he said, voice rough with sleep. "Like you're afraid the floor might not hold you." She paused at the hearth. "Old floors creak, best not to wake ghosts." He sat up, blankets sliding to his waist. "No ghosts in this house, just me." "And you?" She didn't answer, but she lit the fire and warmed a tin of beans, her shoulders relaxing as the room filled with heat. Later, she hauled buckets from the well while Isaac repaired the hinge on the smokehouse door. The wind had stripped the last of the leaves from the cottonwoods by the creek, and the world looked scraped clean. He watched her from where he knelt, his hands red with cold. She moved like someone who had known stillness too long and now couldn't bear it. "You ever trap?" he asked, standing and dusting snow from his knees. She nodded. "My brother taught me, mostly rabbits. Once we got a fox, but it chewed its own leg off and bled out under a cedar." He studied her. "That kind of lesson sticks." She didn't look away. "I was 12. They set 3 snares near the tree line that afternoon, and she showed him how to check the tension without leaving scent behind. Her fingers were bare, red, and cracked, but she refused the gloves he offered. "I've had worse," she said. "And I need to feel what I'm doing." That night, he shaved slivers from a block of pine and carved them into kindling while she cleaned the lantern glass. The cabin was quiet but not silent, wood popping in the stove, wind brushing the shutters, the sound of 2 people sharing space without needing to fill it. "You ever think about building something more?" she asked suddenly. "Not just surviving winter to get to spring, but planting things." Adding on. He set down his knife. "I've thought about it since you came." She didn't smile, but her voice softened. "I want a place that remembers me, not just because I died in it." Isaac leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Then let's make it remember you while you're still living in it." She nodded once, slow. By December, they kept a half-finished list in the ledger on the mantel, root cellar to extend, 2 more hens to buy come thaw, and a window to cut in the kitchen wall for more light. She added a note in tight, careful script. "Flower bed along the south wall." He pointed to it one night. "You planning to grow anything that doesn't feed us?" She shook her head. "Color feeds the soul. Same as bread feeds the belly." He watched her for a long moment, then reached for her hand, calloused fingers threading through hers. When the storms came, they came hard. Snow drifted halfway up the shed door, and the cattle huddled tight in the lean-to. Isaac's ankle flared again from cold, so Almina took over the chores. She didn't complain. She did what needed doing, and she did it well. He lit the stove early the next morning, wincing as he stood. She came in with a fresh armload of wood, cheeks flushed and hair damp with snow. "You're limping worse," she said, setting the logs down. "Only when I walk." She gave him a look, then crossed the room and pressed her hand to his forehead. "No fever," she said, "but you've got the stubborn." He caught her hand before she could step away. "You ever think about what comes after this season? I think about planting seeds. I think about what kind of fence we'll need when calves drop." "That's not what I meant." She didn't move. "I do think about you, about staying." Isaac let out a breath that had been sitting in him for days. "I want to give you my name, Almina." She blinked once. "You don't owe me anything. I'm not offering out of debt. I'm asking because I want you to be my wife." She didn't answer right away, but her hand curled tighter around his. Then she said, "I'll say yes. But only if I get to keep planting flowers. You can plant a whole field if you want." She kissed him for the first time, then firm, certain, her gloved hand still resting against his cheek. Outside, the wind shifted, and inside, the future began to take root. The wedding was quiet. No preacher, no paper. Just old pine boughs hung above the mantel, and a pair of silver rings Isaac had worked from a melted spoon and scrap wire, filed smooth and warm from his hands. The only witness was the land itself, snow resting heavy on the hills, the hush of the wind through bare branches, and the soft creak of the cabin settling deeper into winter. "You ready?" Isaac asked, standing before her with the ring cupped in his palm. Almina nodded, her eyes steady. "I've been ready longer than I knew." He slid the ring onto her finger, the metal cool against her skin, and she pressed hers into his hand without trembling. No vows were spoken beyond that. They had already lived them. That night they lay with the storm pressing against the walls, the fire low and steady, her fingers moving along the curve of his arm like she was memorizing him by feel. He pulled the quilt higher. "If we ever leave this place," she said, her voice quiet, "I want to see the bitterroots. My brother used to talk about them like they were a dream." Isaac didn't open his eyes. "We'll go when the calves are grown. You can say your goodbyes to him from somewhere high up." "I already did," she answered, then added, "but I'd still like to see them." When the thaw came, it came slow. Mud swallowed the wagon wheels, and the creek overflowed twice before April settled into something steadier. Isaac strung new wire along the north fence while Almina turned over the garden bed with a spade he'd sharpened for her. She planted hardy things, onions, beans, and a single row of marigolds along the southern edge. "You never told me what your mother's name was," she said one evening, sitting on the porch with her boots off, her ankles bare in the warming air. "Esther. She had hands like yours. Always knew what to do with a wound." Almina picked at a splinter along the porch rail. "Mine was named Re-Ni. She was loud and always moving. She wouldn't have lasted a week out here." Isaac leaned back in the chair beside her. "You think she'd like me? She'd probably tell you to cut your hair and talk less." She smiled, not quite teasing. "But she'd like your steadiness. She always said I needed grounding." He reached for her foot, calloused thumb brushing along her heel. "I'm not going anywhere. I know that now." In early May, they rode out along the ridge, checking for signs of bear near the calving grounds. Almina carried the rifle across her saddle, her eyes sweeping the brush like she'd been born to it. When they stopped to water the horses, she knelt by the stream and cupped the cold water to her lips. "I used to dream about places like this," she said. Isaac tethered the reins nearby. "And now I dream about what comes next." They moved through spring like the land itself, slow with purpose. The cabin grew fuller. Isaac built a bench for the porch. Almina tacked 3 lengths of muslin in the windows. She mended his old coat with blue thread, the only color she had, and told him it looked better that way. One afternoon, she came in from the barn with dirt on her cheek and something unreadable in her eyes. She stood by the door for a long time before speaking. "I think I might be with child." Isaac didn't move, didn't speak at first, just looked at her, then stepped forward and took her face in both hands. "Are you afraid?" he asked. "No," she said. "I thought I would be, but I'm not." He pressed his forehead to hers. "You won't be alone in it." "I know," she whispered. "That's why I can breathe." That night, he lit the lamp early and carved a new length of wood for the cradle. She sat nearby, stitching a scrap of calico without rush. Outside, the frogs had returned to the creek. Inside, the quiet held something fuller now, like a house learning to breathe deeper. "You remember the first thing you said to me?" she asked, not looking up. Isaac blew wood dust from the groove he'd just cut. "I told you forgot to steal my heart." She met his eyes then. "I didn't forget. I just wasn't sure I deserved it." He set the carving knife down and crossed to her, pulling her gently to her feet. "You do," he said. "Every piece of it." She rested her palms on his chest, not as a question this time, but as a promise. "Then I'll carry it with me. Always." And with spring pressing at the windows and love held like something unbreakable between them, they stood in the middle of their quiet household, rooted and finally home. By midsummer, the garden had taken hold. Beans climbed their twine, squash leaves spread wide and heavy, and the marigolds bloomed in gold and rust beside the porch, stubborn against the dry wind. Isaac built a trellis for the runner beans with stripped willow poles, tying each joint tight with rawhide. Almina stood nearby with her hands pressed to her back, the swell of her belly now unmistakable beneath her cotton dress. "You think they'll grow straight?" she asked, shading her face with her palm. "They'll reach for the sun, same as anything else," he said, tightening the last knot. She looked past the fence toward the low ridge, where the cottonwoods shimmered in the heat. "I used to think I'd never see things grow again, not after Missouri." Isaac stepped down from the ladder and wiped his brow with his sleeve. "You never told me what you left behind there." "Not really. My father's grave, and a house with walls thin enough to hear the neighbors argue through them." She bent slowly to gather the empty seed sack. "After the war, there weren't many men left. Folks started marrying bad matches just to keep from starving. I wasn't willing." Isaac took the sack from her hand. "You didn't have to be. You held out for something worth it." "Did I?" she asked, but her voice carried no doubt. "You did," he said, and brushed his knuckles along the curve of her arm. That night, she sat on the porch while he strung harness leather inside. He heard her humming something low, unfamiliar. When he stepped outside to join her, she didn't stop. "What is that?" he asked, easing down into the rocker beside her. "A lullaby my mother used to sing." "I hadn't thought of it in years." He watched her for a while before speaking again. "Do you miss her more now?" "I don't think of her like I used to. I used to ache for what she didn't live to see. Now I wonder what she would have said if she saw this." "Us. She'd be proud." "I think she'd ask why I waited so long," Almina said, then added, "but she'd understand." The wind shifted through the grass and the stars came out in clusters, sharp and clear. Isaac leaned forward. "Do you ever worry about what kind of mother you'll be?" "I worry about what I won't know, what I might miss." "You'll know what matters," he said. "You already do." She reached for his hand then, fingers finding his without hesitation. "Then let's teach them how to grow things. And how to stay." In August, the baby came early. Isaac rode hard to fetch the midwife from Willow Creek, returning with her just before nightfall. Almina labored through the dark, sweat on her brow and both hands clenched in the quilt Isaac had carried home from Bozeman the spring before. She didn't cry out. She breathed through it, low and steady, and when the child arrived, she took him to her chest like she'd known him already. The midwife cleaned the boy and swaddled him close. Isaac sat beside the bed, one hand resting on Almina's shoulder, the other brushing through the damp curls at her temple. "He's strong," she whispered. "Like you." Isaac looked at the boy, then at her. "He's safe, like you made us." They named him Caleb after Almina's brother. 2 days later, Isaac fixed the cradle in the corner where the morning light would reach but not blind. Almina sat in the rocker, Caleb asleep in her arms. She watched her husband work, eyes soft, content. "You reckon he'll want to be a rancher?" she asked. Isaac set the last peg and turned. "Only if he likes early mornings and cold fingers. Maybe he'll want to read books or build things. Whatever he wants, we'll make room." The weeks passed. Caleb grew, fists always moving, eyes wide at every new sound. Almina showed him the garden by touch, guiding his tiny fingers along the bean pods and the rough edges of squash vines. Isaac carried him down to the creek in the evenings, pointing out deer tracks and showing him how to listen to the water. One evening, Isaac came in from the field and found Almina asleep in the chair, Caleb curled against her chest. The lantern flickered low. He watched them for a long moment before kneeling beside her and brushing her hair back. She stirred. "I didn't mean to fall asleep. You needed it." She looked down at Caleb, then back to Isaac. "I never knew peace could feel like this." "It's not peace," he said gently. "It's home." Autumn came again, the gold leaves returning to the cottonwoods, the wind cooler now but gentle. The garden faded, but the marigolds bloomed longer than expected, stubborn and vivid against the fading green. Isaac built a second rocker for the porch. Almina sat in one with Caleb in her arms, watching the light change across the field. Isaac joined her and rested a hand on his son's small back. "I was thinking," he said, "we ought to carve our names into the beam over the door, a mark that says we were here, that we made something." Almina looked at him, the boy, the land stretched out before them. "We already have." And so they stayed, the three of them, rooted deep in what they'd built together. Not just a cabin or a field, but a life drawn slow and steady, the kind that could hold through storms and silence alike, the kind that lasted.